I think a common mistake a lot of YouTubers make is doing a review on a product when the euphoria is at its highest. I mean, you're excited, you want to share it with the world. Does that taint the review? Well, I was faced with a situation where I had to choose a guitar out of a lineup, and I chose the Schecter C1 SLS Elite. Now, I gave it as honest a review as I could at the time. I have to admit, I was excited to have it and play it, and I gave you what I felt was the most honest review that I could do. I talked about what I liked, and I talked about what I didn't, but ultimately I chose it out of a lineup of 3 guitars. But a number of you have asked me, do you still feel the same way? It's been about 10 months, and I thought, what a great idea for a video. So let's talk about it. Hey there, I'm Dan, the self-proclaimed Lonely Rocker. Thank you so much for joining me today. So yes, the Schecter C1 SLS Elite, if you've been following this channel, it's become a workhorse here in the studio. I featured it in many videos. It's that modern spec guitar that I didn't have before this one, Fishman Fluence. Modern's in here, and this guitar is fast as hell. I mean, look at that neck. That neck through body design, just the natural finish. Really getting the job done for the most part. Now, when I did the review, I was excited to embrace a new type of guitar because I never had a modern spec guitar before. I mostly like Gibson, Suhr, those are my main guitars. So I thought it was time to have something a little more modern that I could pair with my angled Powerball 2. But the one thing that I did not like about this guitar right from the first time I played it was the tuners. And that has continued to be a problem. I've had this guitar professionally set up. I've committed it to drop C. There's a custom gauge strings on here, so we have proper tension on the neck. Everything should be perfect. And still the tuners continue to give me trouble. I'm going to do some close-ups so you can see what's going on with the tuners in a second. But if any of you Schecter players out there with the Schecter branded locking tuners on your guitars, I'd love to know about your experiences with these tuners. Did I just get a bad set? Is this common with these kind of tuners? You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. Anyways, as luck would have it, I've been wanting to replace these with the Godot locking tuners because in that shootout of the 3 guitars I had, the Ibanez had the Godot locking tuners, and I was salivating over them, wondering if I could just pull them off of that guitar and pop them on here. But I live north of Toronto, Canada, and getting them locally has actually been a problem. I've looked on Amazon, I've looked at different music stores, I just couldn't get the ones that I wanted. And finally today, there's a local store here that carries all sorts of guitar parts, and they happen to have them in stock. So I ran over there to grab them. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna show you the problem that I've got with these ones, then we're gonna do the swap, and then I'm going to give you the full lowdown on what I really think about the Schecter C1 SLS Elite after about 10 months. The problem with these Schecter tuners is they sometimes emit a ping when you detune them, and then the tuners lose some tension. To regain enough tension to be able to tune the string, you need to give it about a quarter turn. Before that, turning the tuner barely adjusts the tuning at all. And I generally find the precision lacking for finer tuning. Well, now that you've seen my problem, fellow Schecter owners with a similar Schecter branded locking tuners, are you experiencing the same problem? You know, when it pings like that, then you lose tension for a little bit. You got to turn it almost like a quarter turn before it regains tension. And when you're in the heat of battle, that's no go for me. So I really had to change the tuners. So the Godot locking tuners. Now, the biggest problem I had in replacing the tuners is I wanted tuners that would drop right in. It's such a beautiful finish on the guitar, even on the back of the neck and the headstock. There's a set screw, I think they call it a tag, where the tuner, screws itself to the headstock. Some are on a 45-degree angle, some on a 90-degree angle. So this particular guitar, it's at a 45. So finding the right locking tuner with the right color, with that tag at the right angle, I just couldn't find it until today. The only trade-off is the buttons on these tuners are smaller than the sort of bigger kidney bean ones on this one. So I got to live with that because I just can't deal with this tuning issue anymore. All right, so I'm going to attempt to pop these in. I'm hoping it's a direct drop-in, and then I'll talk about my full feelings on the guitar after 10 months. As this is not a guitar repair channel, I'll blast through this while giving you the basics if you've never changed your own tuners before. Obviously, the size of the hole is critical. You don't want to modify this if you don't know what you're doing. So bring your guitar into the store to confirm if your chosen tuners will fit. You don't have to match the angle of the tag if you don't care, but I wanted to keep the finish clean on the back of my headstock. I used a capo in an attempt to hold the strings in place when I unwrapped them from the old tuners. Unfortunately, that failed miserably. Bad capo. I started by loosening the screw that connects the tuner to the headstock. Then I loosened and removed the string. Once off, I loosened the bushing and then removed it. The tuners then popped off easily. Next, I lined up the new tuner and made sure the tag lined up with the original screw hole. It was pretty close. In fact, some of the other ones were even better. I then locked the new tuners in place with the screws provided. Then I flipped over the guitar and screwed in the new bushings. This should be snug, but don't over tighten it and be careful not to scratch the finish on your guitar. Then I put the strings back on and brought them up close to tension. I repeated this until all 6 were done. I was concerned the smaller knobs wouldn't look as good as the larger original ones. I think I'm actually okay with it. It feels less crowded. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. All right, so it's been a night. I decided to let this guitar rest after I put on the tuners. I made a little bit of a mistake. Now, shooting videos at the same time, doing some work on the guitar. What I should have done was remove 1 tuner at a time, but I did 2, and then I did 4, and then I think that threw out the tension on the neck a little bit. I just had this guitar set up. It was playing pretty good, with the exception of some of the tuning issues I was having. Anyways, I gave it a little tweak this morning because it was buzzing in a couple places. Like, oh God, so I'm gonna have to get it set up again. But anyways, what did I talk about at the beginning of this video? You know, doing reviews in a timely manner in the right circumstances. It's hard sometimes. I probably should wait 2 weeks and do this video, but the show must go on. Anyways, I can say right off the bat that this was a very big upgrade to this guitar. I really did not like those tuners. You saw the problems that I had, and right away I could just feel the responsiveness from these are so much better. And this is probably one of the easiest upgrades you can do on a guitar, but bit on more on that in a second. So I want to talk about my overall feeling about this guitar now that it's been 10 months. I don't want to redo the review. If you missed that series of videos that I did earlier, there's actually 4 videos, 3 different guitars, and I finally decided which one and told you why. So I'll link that up here or down below, and I'll definitely put one in the end card. So definitely check it out if you want to know why I chose this one over the other ones. But 10 months later, I'm still enjoying playing this guitar. I'm certainly not disappointed. It hasn't been as rock solid as I hoped it would be. And one of the big problems, of course, tuning. Now, we'll see going forward if this improves the situation. I was tuning it this morning, and I'm having a little issue with the G string today, it seems. Again, I might need a setup. We'll see how it goes. But I'm not disappointed. I'm really enjoying this guitar. I'm using it a lot. The main purpose and reason I got this guitar is I wanted some more higher gain tones. I've got the active pickups here. None of my other guitars do. So this pairs really nicely with the angle over there. And others as well. Clean tones are really nice. There's a good range of tones on here, and I find it really versatile. And that's sort of a theme here in my studio. My amps, most of them, pretty much all of them are multi-channel guitars with different pickups. I just like to have options when recording. It's just how I like to work. So that definitely satisfies that. It's a fun guitar to play. It feels really good in my hands. This neck, I fell in love with it when I first laid my hands on it for the first time, and that hasn't changed. I mean, the finish is beautiful. I love that natural feel. I don't like necks that have too much finish on them. So I have a few guitars like this, and it's just what I prefer. Now, it's a really small neck. Now, talking about tuning stability, this is something that I did notice when I first got it. And again, this is a question that I would ask some of you that play guitars with really thin necks. Now, this is advertised with 2 carbon fiber rods inside to create stability. But check this out. Without too much effort, I can pull it out of tune. So if you're a really aggressive player, as I am sometimes, I find myself, especially when recording, I can just hear that guitar going out of tune. So sitting here in a controlled environment, I can play nice and easy, and I can sort of remedy that. But if you're playing live and you're really getting into it goes out of tune pretty easily. So I don't know if it's just this particular one. I really don't think I got a lemon, but it is a pretty thin neck, so it's something that I think you need to be aware about. So the other thing I want to talk about that I discovered after having this guitar for a while, speaking of the neck, because one of the things that I complimented this guitar about was the fretwork. With the exception of a couple of rough ones that I found on top, overall I thought the fretwork was quite well done. What's happened, I'm in Canada, I'm north of Toronto. We have beautiful summers, a little humid, but really, really nice summers. And we have pretty cold winters. So we go through the full spectrum of humidity and temperature. So during the winter time, I do humidify my house and I try to supplement that here in my studio. But it's a challenge sometimes to keep it over 50%. I think it's been hovering around 40%. I do have a meter, so I do monitor it. So about a month into the winter this year, I picked up the guitar and suddenly I noticed some fret sprouting. And that was definitely not here when I bought the guitar. So clearly the neck, the wood shrunk a little bit, which is not unusual. But this is something that I think you have to be prepared for, depending on what climate you're in, is that these guitars, okay, high-end assembly line, but this is an assembly line guitar made in the Korean factory. They make a lot of these guitars. I don't think they're aging the wood as long as some other instruments at a higher price point. This Sir, for example, here, I know I've read that they've aged the wood for their necks for a long time, and this is baked maple that really dries it out. This guitar has been in this environment that's for 4 winters now, and it never budged. Whereas the first winter, I noticed a change to the neck here. Now, that's not an expensive repair, but it's something that I'm going to have to address at some point, and something that you should be aware of. If they're not aging the wood as long as some maybe more expensive instruments, it's something that I think you're going to have to be aware of when you buy a guitar like this, again, depending on the climate that you're in. I think, getting a guitar that you really like, that feels good in your hands, getting it set up when you first get it, play it, but you may expect to have to do some work on the guitar maybe 10 months to a year after you get it. I mean, we should maintain our guitars anyways, but it happened to this guitar. It didn't happen to this. I have some other budget guitars that I featured in different videos, and one of them had really nice fretwork, and a week into the winter, that thing could cut my grass. It's pretty sharp on the ends. So the necks are going to shrink. They're going to dry up over time, and that's something I think you need to expect, and it did happen to this one. So it's not terrible, and I decided to leave it for now, but perhaps when I do get a full setup, I may just get that filed a little bit just to get rid of the ends there. But aside from that, but overall, the neck has remained pretty straight. This thing with the neck, pulling on it, again, it's going to be different for every player. If you're really aggressive, if you are trying one of these guitars, see if that happens to you and see if that's a deal breaker for you. Just something that I want to share with you. So, but other than that, I mean, I love how this guitar sounds. It really is a utility instrument for me here in the studio. It's getting me those tones that I wasn't getting before. I really want to keep an eye on the tuning issues that I've had. Like I said, hopefully I've remedied that situation with these tuners, and I'm going to give this a good setup. I might even take it into my guy again just to get it perfectly set up and see how it goes. So I'm still happy with this guitar. Would I buy another Schecter? Absolutely, I would. I've got my eye on a couple other models. I think at this price point, you do get a lot of value. I mean, there's a lot of high-end appointments, hip shot bridge, the Fishman Fluence modern pickups on it, Ernie Ball compensated nut, which begs the question, why did they put such crappy tuners on the guitar? I guess you have to save money somewhere. And really, if you want to argue that point, that is the easiest upgrade to do. If you want to change your bridge, that's a little bit more complicated. Change your nut, that's just a lot more work and takes a lot more expertise. A bozo like me was able to change the tuners without much issue. So I guess if you had to compensate somewhere, that's probably the place to do it. Unfortunately, if it affects tuning, it might affect the experience of the person who buys the guitar. So anyways, overall, I still rate this guitar really high. I think it's excellent value for the money. I don't think there's a lot of guitars at this price point offer the features that this guitar has. I'm going to work through the tuning issues, and hopefully we'll nip that, and you're going to continue to see it here on this channel. So anyways, I hope that was a helpful update on this guitar. I do my best here. I'm sharing experiences. I want to be as honest and open with you guys as I can, and I'm happy to share any information that I discover with you. You can ask me in the comments. I do interact with people who watch this channel, so always happy to hear from you. Anyways, if you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Don't forget, I've got that other video where I talk about this and those other 2 modern spec guitars. I'm going to put that right here if you want to check it out. And remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. I'll catch you in the next one.